Hi there, and welcome to our Slate demo series. Today is part one of a three-part series on how to collect and store swipe tracking information in Slate. We are focusing on the use case of library study hall hours to track how long a student has spent at study hall. The specific use case for this came to be for tracking student athletes to make sure that they are achieving their study hall minimum requirements to maintain scholarships. But please know that this application can be shifted to many other use cases like swiping in at the student recreation center, specific dining halls, dorms, etc. So know that this is an application that can be shifted to your institution's needs. However, we are focusing on study hall hours specifically. Before we dig in too deep, let me introduce myself. My name is Courtney Mumma. I'm the Assistant Director of Student Success Implementations here at Carnegie. I'm coming at y'all with 6 years of Slate experience. I started as a Slate captain at a very small art college in Portland, Oregon. Then I worked at Technolutions for 2 years as a client support engineer. And then the rest of my time has been spent here at Carnegie in this specific role. And I am the confident and enthusiastic thrill seeker. To reiterate today's goal, part one of a three-part series on swipe tracking in Slate. Today, we're going to deep dive into entities, as entities are the foundation of this specific process. So we're going to start off with what is an entity, how to build an entity. We're going to build one together on call. And then step 3 is next steps for part 2. Before I show you entities, let me show you what this process looks like so that we're all on the same page about what we can expect at the end of this 3-part series. So again, focusing on library study hall. This is a form within Slate. That's going to be part 2, sneak peek. But this is what the process looks like. So the student swipes their ID card, their ID number populates within this first field, and the student selects if they're checking in or if they're checking out. I'm going to go ahead and click checked in, and then this referrer is visible for right now, but this is something that can change based on how many forms you have or how many study hall locations you have, library versus rec center, etc. So wanting to make sure that we have more data than necessary sometimes, just to make sure that we are able to calculate that later. Once a student has selected checked in, we are going to submit. And then we have a redirect form. As you can see, it's going to self-submit. This is the student, and it's going to say checked in, includes the term, and then the study hall. And that's what it looks like on the front end. That's all the student has to do. They have to swipe their ID card, their number populates, and then they select checked in or checked out. And then that is the whole process from the student perspective. Before we get into how all of that is built, we got to start with our entities. So what is an entity? The knowledge base defines entities as custom-built tables of grouped data points that are unique to your institution. This is true. However, I think you'll already know a couple examples of what an entity can look like. When you migrate to a student tab or a record tab and go to their profile tab, any of these data tables on the side, so schools, scores, jobs, courses, interest, and sports, are pre-created entities that store those one-to-many relationships that Technolutions comes with out of the box. So to dig into that a little further, this is the schools table. This is a singular table within Slate, but Isla has 3 different unique rows of information. She attended University of Southern California from this date to this date. It was a graduate level of study, and her major was business administration. She also attended University of Oregon, which has its own unique code that's different from University of Southern California. And this includes all of the unique information about Isla's experience at University of Oregon, which is, again, different than Lincoln High School. So this is a great example of a pre-configured entity, but Technolutions and Slate allows us to create our own data tables, much like schools is the data table that's collecting this information. We get to create our own. So let's go ahead and let's build one together. If we're starting here in the home slate, we're going to migrate over to our database. The first thing we're going to search for is entities. Seems like a pretty good first place to start, but when you're creating your entity, you're going to go ahead and click Insert, and then name your entity. So for this demonstration, we're going to do swipe tracking. You can call this card tracking, card swiping, swipe tracking. You can call it whatever makes the most sense to you, but you're going to give it a descriptive name, and then you're going to choose your scope. Any entity can exist on any record-specific data table. So person, application, and then here are our different data sets. We have courses, early alerts, organization contacts, and organizations. But because one person is responsible for their own swipe tracking, this is going to be a person scoped entity. And then you're going to go ahead and click save, and then you should have something like this. Next step in the entity building world is creating fields. So we're going to come back to our database. We're going to search for fields, and then we're going to create a new field. Now, an entity is not a record, and so we're going to choose related. And then when we scroll down, we should see our entity as one of our new scopes. Choose that. And then the ID needs to be unique across all of your fields in Slate. And so I'm going to do swipe tracking, and let's make this one the status field. That is the checked in and the checked out field. And then the name, status. Please use folders. This will save you time in trying to find all of your different fields across the board. And so you're going to choose swipe tracking, or if you don't have one already, click other, and then you can type swipe tracking into here. Be consistent with your naming conventions. Again, just makes it easier when you're looking for information later. Category, you can have an additional category here. I'm choosing to not. And then our field type, this is going to be a single valued field. And we are going to find a prompt list for status, study hall status. We don't need to migrate over to any of the advanced settings or the display characteristics. This is all that we need to create that very first field. Now you can see that I'm associating this with a specific prompt. So once you click save, let's migrate over into prompts. And then you're going to create a new prompt key, and this can be swipe status. And then you just want to make sure that it matches whatever prompt key you put into yours. I already have this created, so I'm not going to click save here, but once you have your name and your key, you should have a field that looks like this. And you're going to add in your new prompt, one for checked in and one for checked out. And that's all that you need there. I'm going to come over to our fields, and I'm going to show you all of the different fields that we have for this specific process. We have our status field, which we just created. We have a term field, which should be connected to your hopefully already existing term prompt list. So like fall 24, 25, summer, all of those information. And then we have a form that is the library study hall form that we saw on the demo of the process. And then we have one extra field in here for admin update. This is necessary because students sometimes are running from one thing to the other and they forget to check out. So we need to have some kind of process in place where we can administratively add in how much time they spent after we check in with the student to make sure that we're putting in accurate amounts of time. Otherwise, our calculations won't be correct. So have an admin update here, and every one of those fields, minus the term and status, should just be free text fields and do not use for merging. Okay, once you have your fields and your prompts, you build all of those together. The next is to refresh the quartet. And so in fields, you're going to force a refresh of your fields. Come back over to prompts, and here, refresh here. And then the last two places, if you go to database, it's going to be configurable joins library under queries. Click this, refresh. And while that's going, we need to refresh the quartet, because once we make new fields and prompts, we have to tell Slate that we made new fields and prompts. And so this basically just breaks the cache across the system so that we have access to these fields when we go on to next steps. And then the last one is configure, Slate template library. And then we refresh here. Okay, while it's refreshing, all entities are forms within forms within forms. They're kind of just nested forms. And so when we go back to our student record and we look at the profile tab under schools, this page, this tab that we're on, is a person page. And then when we click into any one of our rows, this pop-up here is called a widget. So that's the next step in this process. We have to create the widget, the page, and then associate it with a tab. So follow me over into forms. We're going to create a new form, and this is going to be swipe tracking widget. And I'm going to make this a demo folder. I can use a folder structure. I'm going to put it in swipe tracking, and I'm going to go ahead and make it confirmed. And those are the only settings that you need to create this initial widget. Any new form that you create defaults to person scoped, which is really helpful in some cases, but when we're making a bunch of non-person scoped forms, it is a little tedious because now we're going to want to come in here and we're just going to want to delete these fields because we're not collecting these on that form. So go ahead and delete the pre-configured fields and then come up to edit properties, and we're going to change this scope from person to entity widget. Again, this is that pop-up, and we're going to choose the entity that we want associated with it, so swipe tracking. That's all that we have to do for this specific step, and then we click save. And now, when we go to map our fields by choosing a text box, we are only allowed to select those entity scoped fields that we created in step 2. So I'm going to choose swipe tracking. This is going to be our form field. Save, and then I'm going to double click back into this and change this to admin update. And then I'm going to save it as copy. Now we have our 2 free text fields in here, but we know we have 2 other fields, and those are prompt driven fields, so status and term. So I'm going to choose our select list down here at the bottom, swipe tracking, and then we can see those 2 fields in here. Status, come in, term, save as copy. Okay, so those are the only things that you need on this specific pop-up because this is all the information that we're collecting as of right now. You're more than welcome to collect additional information. Just make sure that you have it in this spot specifically. Next, we're going to come back into edit properties, and now we can see that we have a new configuration on this general tab, and that's for custom list exports. These are our column headers when we are looking at this page of information. So coming back over to our friend Isla on the profile tab, schools, it's this information. So name, type, to and from, those are your column headers, and those are your custom list fields. So for this, I'm going to choose our created date, our updated date, admin, form, status, and term. Click save. For the sake of time, I'm not going to change these names, but I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now our widget is done. So that's the pop-up. Pop-up is complete. Let's come back to our forms. We're going to create form number 2, and this is going to be swipe tracking tab folder. You already know we're going to make it confirmed in here. Click save, edit our form. Same steps as before. We're going to delete the pre-configured information, come into edit properties, and we're going to change the scope from person to person page. Person page scope fields, forms are the only ones that are eligible for tabs. And so we want to make sure that we're choosing person page scope. Click save. And now we're going to come down here and we're going to choose widget table because we just made our entity widget. And this is the form that that widget or that pop-up will exist within. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to grab our swipe tracking widget demo that we just created. Click save. And that's the only thing that you need to have on here for right now. We're going to add some more calculations in part 3, but right now you just need to have your widget table here. And then the last and final step is to go back to database, come over to tabs under the records and data set, and we're going to make a new tab. And this is going to be swipe tracking. I'm typing demo. You do not have to type demo. And then the scope is person. Make sure your scope is consistent throughout. And then we're going to choose our form of swipe tracking tab. Order, this is the order in which your tabs show up on a single record, but I'm going to choose 1 for this purpose. You can have permissions in the back end. You can also show different colors and choose populations. And I'm going to go ahead and click save. I'm going to come back to Isla, refresh, And now we have swipe tracking demo showing up here. And that's where we're going to leave it off for part 1. This is to create your entity. Part 2 is going to be the form configuration for checking in and checking out. And so that was the first step, is how to set up that form of checking in and checking out. That process is going to include query string parameters, a super fun auto-submitting form. We're also going to talk about matching criteria for entities so that we're just not creating a bunch of different entity rows every time the form is submitted. So thank you so much for building that entity together. Look forward to chatting with you all next month for part 2, where we build that initial form together. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you then.